I don't have an intro for this, but I just wanted to show off this clapper that my brother and his girlfriend gave me for my 21st birthday. I just turned 21, yay. If you have any ideas of how I can incorporate this more into my videos, then just suggest things because I'm looking for ways. Big Eyes is directed by Tim Burton, co-written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karajewski, and stars Amy Adams and Christoph Waltz. And Big Eyes is the true story of Margaret Keane and Walter Keane. And Margaret Keane, played by Amy Adams here, leaves her husband and moves to San Francisco, where she paints big-eyed children on the streets. And she attracts the attention of Walter Keane, played by Christoph Waltz, and he begins to help her sell her art, but he claims the art as his own. And Margaret goes along with this ruse until it begins to weigh down on her, the lies she has to tell to her friends and to herself. And Big Eyes is a good-looking movie. It has a strong performance from Amy Adams in the middle of it. I just do think it has quite a few problems, most notably the writing. First of all, the visuals in Big Eyes still manage to feel very Burton-esque, despite like the cinematography being quite bright from Bruno Del Bono. Like, it's interesting, the version of San Francisco they portray in this movie, it feels very small and contained, which I think actually works for the story's intimacy. And the period detail is good, like the 60s and 70s, or sorry, the 50s and 60s, yeah. And for me, the paintings also, especially from Margaret, are always very interesting to look at, like these big-eyed small children. And there are a couple of moments where it's nice that the paintings actually kind of seep into reality, where Margaret begins to see like people with big eyes. And the score by Danny Elfman is always, it's good as always. I think it's actually the best part of this movie. It's a very, very good score. And Amy Adams in this movie, I think, she really just has a natural innocence about her that I think really lets the fear and her internal struggle really come across very clearly. And I like how near the end of the movie, she does begin to fight back, but it's not like she turns on a dime and suddenly like an extremely strong person. She's still really nervous about it, and what really helps sell that nervousness is Christoph Waltz's performance, who will forever keep getting cast as these charming villains because he's just so good at playing those kinds of characters. Like, he does get pretty scary during some moments, and I really like how Amy Adams is able to bounce off that and remain like nervous and whatnot. Christoph Waltz can be a bit over the top at points, but I don't necessarily blame him for that. And Tim Burton's directing style at this point is kind of love it or hate it. If you don't like it, you're not gonna like it here. If you like it, you will like it here. This is really probably his most normal film, quote unquote. But his touch is really just still there. And Burton at his best makes his strength really is making strangeness seem heartfelt and accessible, and this is the most realistic he's ever been because he's dealing with these kinds of historical characters and their intimate story. But there are problems with Big Eyes, like I mentioned. For one, the editing by J.C. Bond I think is just messy, like no other way around it. Because like the progression of time always feels hasty. Like right from the first scene when Margaret goes to San Francisco, it just feels like you missed like a few minutes of footage, and like you're suddenly here. And whenever the movie skips forward in time, it just feels really awkward. And there are a lot of scenes that do feel awkwardly placed because it doesn't feel like they carry momentum over. And Tim Burton really does go a bit overboard at certain points, especially near the ending, which I thought he should have, taken really seriously. But instead, he kind of makes it over the top. He makes Christoph Waltz's performance over the top, and it comes off as slightly comedic when, I feel like the gravity of the situation should have been addressed more. And the writing really is my biggest problem because it never delves into the Keens being artists. You never understand the big-eyed children from the point of view of Margaret, really, or from Walter either. And we don't really get that much about the whole intellectual property rights thing that this movie's trying to explore, or even like the psychological aspect of it is still pretty lacking, unfortunately. So the characters of Margaret and Keane do suffer because they don't feel like fleshed out characters. But in the end, I would say that Big Eyes is still an okay movie. You will like it if you like Tim Burton, but it's hard for me to recommend easily, especially if you're just watching it because you want to see the art. It doesn't really focus on the art that much, so just be warned, I guess. So those are my thoughts on Big Eyes. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.